Thank you very much, and thank you all for your testimony. Chairman Pai, let's talk about bringing broadband to economically challenged areas, and this is certainly something that Commissioner Clyburn emphasized in her prepared testimony. You were successful in moving forward two major Universal Service Fund items, including Phase 2 of the Mobility Fund. These will undoubtedly help bring broadband services to rural and hard-to-reach areas. You have 4 major initiatives in this regard, I understand. So tell us about your plan to emphasize areas where average household income falls below 75% of the national median, requiring states and localities to have deployment-friendly policies, and I think you used that term in your testimony also, and then tell about tax incentives and zones that you might designate for the use of tax credits.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. This is something I'm really passionate about. I outlined in September what I hoped would be a bipartisan blueprint for action, regardless of who assumed leadership of the commission, precisely because I thought that these ideas knew no partisan angle or party affiliation. One of the key proposals, which you mentioned, was my proposal for Congress to give us the authority to set up what are known as what I've called gigabit opportunity zones. And the idea here was that you would create a geographic area as small as a city block in an urban environment or as large as a rural county, in which the median income of citizens within that area was 75% or less of the national average income. And the idea would be that to provide tax incentives to providers to build out in those areas. And what part of that also would be a requirement that states and localities adopt broadband-friendly policies so that the deployment was eased in terms of the access to rights of way and pole attachments and the like. Additionally, to make sure that entrepreneurs could take advantage of those networks, my idea was to provide some relief for the employer side of the payroll taxes for new companies that want to set up businesses in those areas. And that way, people who live in those areas, who want to create jobs in those areas, would have a greater incentive to do so. And it was drawn from the spirit of former Secretary Jack Kemp at the Housing and Urban Development. And my thinking was, well, why don't we update for the 21st century his idea about enterprise zones? And this could give people who are in poverty or who otherwise don't have economic opportunity a greater chance to achieve prosperity in the digital era. And I'm hopeful, working with members of Congress, that we can do that.
This is going to require legislation.
That is correct, sir.
And Commissioner Clyburn, what do you think about such legislation?
If such legislation allows us to do what we do best, if such legislation also recognizes that affordability is a factor when it comes to adoption of services. So if we look at all of the universal principles and tools in our arsenal, I think it would be a good series of steps forward in terms of bridging those gaps that currently exist. But affordability has to be a part of the conversation.
Chairman Pai, Commissioner Clyburn says there is an affordability gap. Do you agree with this, and what would you do about it?
I do agree, which is part of the reason in response to Chairman Thune I expressed so much concern about the rate floor, because that actually involves the FCC mandating that companies increase the rates that rural customers have to pay. Here, too, I think we need to do more to ensure that consumers have competition, choice, and affordable access to the Internet, and that's something I'm committed to working with her and with you about.
The distinguished ranking member wants the Commission to be pro-consumer. I think we all agree with that. It seems to me that reversing the net neutrality rule with regard to free data and zero rating has turned out to be pro-consumer in that not long after you terminated the investigation into these practices, we saw a series of new pro-consumer unlimited data offerings come into the market. Do you think that new flood of opportunities came as a direct result of your action in this regard?
Senator, I don't know if it was a direct result, but I do think it simply confirmed the wisdom of our approach, which is to recognize it's a highly competitive marketplace and that wireless carriers have a strong incentive to compete for the consumer's attention. And as a result, now all 4 national wireless carriers are offering new or expanded unlimited data plans. And that's a great thing for consumers.
Turns out the public really liked that.
Correct, sir.
at least so far. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Wicker.